Hey everybody, how's it going? Just getting some markers out of here, out of this bag, so I can teach this class. Sorry, it's been a little cold over here as we had all the doors open and we were getting things ready for the class. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. So today we're going to be talking about the law of relativity. And we're going to go through the 13 universal laws before we dive into relativity really deep. Relativity is a really neat one. We're going to talk a little bit about Einstein's theory of relativity so you can understand the difference, even though I'm not an expert on Einstein's theory of relativity, but I do understand the basics versus kind of what we're talking about here. And there is some similarity to them, so we'll talk about that. All right, so to get us off, we're going to go over the 13 laws. I have them broken up into threes because it's easier to think of them in those terms. I'm going to go through them a little faster than I normally do, just because we've gone through them a bunch now. So, our first batch is, the first law is the law of one, everything is one. Law 2, everything is mind. Law 3, everything is polarized because everything is fundamentally coming from a great big nothing, which is the one thing, which we still are and are part of. The one thing was one, it is one now, it will always be one. At the same time, it's broken itself up in too many pieces that don't recognize the oneness that they are a part of. And this comes to the mind as well. The breaking itself up, that is the mind prisming out and allowing a lot of darkness and separation from this one thing through confusion. But everything is one, and then everything is also a searching mind. And this sort of sleepiness and awakeness creates the original polarity, which is as soon as consciousness goes bang and wakes up, the oneness that is sleeping, that it came from, is polarized with the moving thing. And this is the basis for so much of reality. You know, if you want to talk about colors, before we're going to get into the colors, you would have to start with the polarity, the black and the white. And from the black and the white, you automatically get gray. And that's that automatic polarity that's built in when the universe is created. So 1, 2, 3. Moving on to 4, 5, 6. We've got vibration. Whatever the first action of the mind of God or the mind of the universe, whatever you want to call it, may be. And let's say it is to go like, I don't know, legs closed, arms open, right? This is just sort of like a generic shape that the mind makes. There is a relative to this vibration that might look something like arms closed, legs open. Within everything in reality, there is a relativity to its energetic nature. And the very first bit of relativity, of course, is this polarity, you know, the sleeping thing and the awake thing. That's the very first relativity. But the relativity exists in a larger scale as we talked about in number 4, you know, as you get into number 4, you get into differentiation where the colors are starting to come out, a gradient of perspective, different dimensions of perception, right? So once we get into this gradient where a vibration can be selected, let's say amongst the color wheel or whatever, there's always a relativity. I used to be an art major when I was, in high school, in the beginning of high school, and one of the things that was really important to learn, if you care about art, and I still do, as I produce a lot of things and have to art direct. It's color contrast and complementary colors and things like that. It's all relativity. You're picking a color and then you're picking a relative to that color on the wheel that has significance. And I'm going to talk about this later when we get deep into relativity, because that's what we're talking about today. How this applies to all sorts of things like comedy and like superhero comic books or whatever. There's just a lot of simple things, and you'll be able to apply it to other things beyond these simple ideas, but they're good ways to start. So you've got a vibration, and you've got the relativity to that vibration. Vibration and relativity, which when we get a vibration and the right relativity, it creates a balance to what we're experiencing. And when we get that balance, it's a sweet spot for us. We're like, oh, that feels good. Because it feels like what? It feels like God. It feels like the universe as one. That is ultimately the law of gender. The law of gender is that there are two vibrations, two distinct vibrations that separated, when this thing was sleeping and awake, and whatever those vibrations may specifically be, they have created sort of a relativity, like a clock. If we go over here, and I mean, it's very simple. It's just like, say we just make a circle and divide it in half. So already we've got what? The polarity, right? So polarity is at the top here, okay? Those are the poles. But then there's other vibrations that we could select. We could pick ourselves over here, right? And now one of the relative vibrations to this would be this guy, which is also a polarity, but other relatives to this guy might be, a split, like a third split, where this got broken like this and it ended up being here, and this was on a certain angle. It was relative in mathematics. So much of what you're seeing here in the universal laws is just simple mathematics. This is just the way a pile of numbers stack up. And there's a whole bunch of things that are created as you do these things. So there are different relative patterning that can go on. But ultimately, the closer you get to its complete and direct relative, the balancing relative, is the more you'll get a balancing energy created by the two things. And that's why you get that cool Star of David looking thing. That's like two different balancing perspectives, blasting at each other. That's really kind of a cool way to look at it. If you're like, here's my flashlight of perspective and there's your flashlight of perspective, and then at a certain point they intersect and they're balancing each other out, and in the middle of this is created that beautiful, perfect balance. So much of gender and like the way that we associate it with relationships or something like that would be like just in terms of we're searching for the balance in another person. But that doesn't mean that you can't get balancing energy from another man, or if you're a man, or another woman if you're a woman. Everybody is balanced differently energetically. I've always liked to say that I'm a bit feminine by nature. I carry myself really masculine. I like to be masculine, but to me, a little bit, it's like putting on a part, like, ooh, I'm gonna go put on that cool costume where I get to go be a warrior, which I enjoy. But by nature, I'm a little bit more like, ooh, all right, cool, let's like be intimate and chill out. And I'm a little softer at heart. So, you don't have to be a boy to be feminine. You don't have to be a girl to be masculine. Sorry. You get what I mean. Saying it backwards. But anyway, this is gender, and it's just the two relative vibrations balancing each other out. All right, moving on to 7, 8, 9. We've got perpetual transmutation of energy, inspired action, cause and effect. Perpetual transmutation of energy, we can think of the nothing that the mind came out of, because there was just oblivion, and then come forth a mind, as perpetual energy. From it came everything. So, just as a little metaphor for these things, I like to put this guy as the black, the perpetual transmutation of energy. This is all my ordering of these laws. This is how it logically works for me. and I think will work and be sensical for other people, but you could look at it other ways if you wanted to. So many of these things aren't so sacrosanct, but the basic concepts behind what I'm teaching you are. So perpetual transmutation of energy. Basically, there's an infinite well of energy from which mind has come, and it can go for forever, essentially. Inspired action is the mind going, ooh, this, ooh, this, ooh, this, ooh, this shape, that shape, things to think. This infinite source of energy and this infinite source of, ooh, what about this, creates cause and effect, which it's really interesting. I did this, I did a little breakdown at the top here with comic books, where you talk about a premise starts. I got a guy, he's got a balloon and a drink, and he's having a nice day, and then he gets struck by lightning, and then he's dead. You know, if we were going to continue the story and instead of being dead, we'll just say like, people are around him like, oh no, he's dead, he's dead. And then this person over here is smart, and he gets on a cell phone, and he's like, hello, 911, police? Okay. So we could have ended it here. Instead of him being dead, we could have said, okay, there's people and they're calling 911 for him. And then we could continue the story. In this case, we wouldn't have to start again with the 3, but we do. This is the, the cause, I should say, this is the cause, and this is the effect. We didn't see what happened to, get this thing going. So, this is the cause, this is the effect. This is also the new cause. Call 911. Oh no, somebody's hurt. This is now the new effect over here. Ambulance shows up, he gets loaded inside, put a wheel on the back here. Wee, 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 they got lights. And the ambulance zips off. Yay, smooth, the guy's gonna be safe. So when you talk about cause and effect, one thing leads to another, leads to another. It's not that one thing's the cause, one thing's the effect, one thing's the cause, one thing's the effect. No, each cause and effect is its own cause and effect, and it goes in a loop, essentially. So there you go. That's 7, 8, and 9, cause and effect. And it's interesting how these happen. Tesla likes to talk about the secrets of 3, 6, and 9. And I kind of feel like you can see them really here very well, which 3, 6, and 9 are almost these like invisible numbers that kind of invisibly hold up the universe in a lot of fashions. A circle's 360 degrees, which breaks down to a 9. And you can kind of see that within the circle, it's sort of like the bubble of existence. The circle is containing a lot of things. And some of the geometry within that 3, 6, and 9 in that containment are interesting because they end up being like, I don't know, in a way for me, I think of them as like soft numbers, small numbers, but very important. They're like the perfect location for the linchpin of solidity of form and whatnot. And with that, you kind of get the one thing in the mind automatically create number 3, polarity. From a third perspective, there's difference between these two things. And that invisible number gets invented. And then similarly, 4, 5, vibration, relativity. Here's the vibration that the consciousness of the universe has taken out of balance with the oneness. And then there's a relative vibration that's in balance with the oneness that brought together, in theory, would make them imbalanced, creating that gender as an illusion. Like, so these two ideas create the idea for the next thing. Oh, well, what if we brought these things together, kind of thing. And then similarly over here with perpetual transmutation of energy and inspired action, you got all this energy, all this action, cause and effect that goes on for forever. Speaking of going on for forever, that is the next 3, which is just sort of the patterning of the laws. So many, like a tarot deck only goes up to 10 in the number section. Then it does a lot of other interesting things. But I wondered why that was, and there was significance to 12, but there was significance to 9. The 9 is sort of the body of an idea or whatever, and then the 10, 11, 12 is just the replication of that idea over and over again in different ways. Rhythm, the law of rhythm is number 10, and we already have a number of rhythms created here in our 1, 2, 3s, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the way we have it broken down. We also have a lot of a larger rhythm, I should say, going 1 through 9, and how that feels. Like, when you break that down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. This is Kabbalah's tree of life. So there's a inherent larger rhythm here, even with the 10. This is like the first. This is a petal for the flower of life. This would be one flower petal. Now, if you go over to number 11, you have correspondence, which is sort of larger rhythms. As we see, we do that 1, 2, invisible number 3, 1, 2, invisible number 3. These two things correspond. And you could also say these two things correspond. And so there's correspondence that goes on. And correspondence can most easily be understood when we talk about music, and we start with the C, right? And then we go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and we end on C, right? So what we're talking about is changing the octave that we're experiencing something in. Our ears can only hear within a certain frequency. Our eyes can only see within a certain frequency. And then things go outside of the realm of our, perspective. Within music, fortunately, we can kind of see that go up. We can hear multiple octaves of a tune. And actually, in this world, we can see multiple octaves of this world. All these colors could be considered different octaves. But also, there's probably a whole new slew of colors up the octave the other way, because that's what happens with music. That's what happens with everything else. So there's colors we haven't seen yet. Isn't that pretty cool? I like thinking about that. I've actually heard of people having experiences where they've seen colors that they'd never seen before. So very interesting concepts. Anyway, yes?
I do have a comment, I guess a question from Shanna Ham. Could be related. Why do I always see 3:33 on the clock? I've started logging it.
So seeing times on a clock, that's what you would call synchronicity. There's a number of things going on there. The universe has rhythms, and while we may think that we're doing things irrationally, so often we're actually kind of like on an invisible bus that is taking us around. I have a story called Falling that I'm working on right now, where this guy just basically ends up falling forever in this open space where he's meant to learn spiritual lessons as he falls down through these different vibrations of light, and all these new things get brought up. But really for me, the metaphor of him falling was something that I recognized about life in general. Like right now, I could be viewed as falling, time is happening, and from a certain perspective, I am sort of weightless, and from another perspective, time is pushing me around. And if you were adjusting your sort of perspective on me as I was even just vibrating in my space, you would see that I was continually moving. And that movement alone is sort of you falling through existence. Now, as you do that, you get into certain rhythms. When people are born, timing, so many different things will affect some of these rhythms where they start in the rhythmic cycles of the universe. But also, when you change significantly what you're doing and move to a more spiritual path, you will find yourself inundated with synchronicity. And I have another story that I've been working on about this, a simpler one that I kind of abandoned for another one. But basically it was a story about this little a princess and a prince who had been manipulated into separation, and their love was supposed to really help the world. They were supposed to save people. And the dark forces essentially manipulated them into breaking up, not being with one another. And now, on the other side of things, they make a new plan to come back and get it right this time. But it's in the future, and now they're a prom prince, prom king and prom queen, kind of thing, or they are supposed to be. And they're supposed to be together forever, and they're supposed to help the sick and make the world a better place. But once again, the evil forces are there trying to stop them from, making their destiny clear. Now, this time, though, the people in the past who had helped them, which were like these fairies and these dwarves, leprechaun kind of stuff, goblins, whatever. These stories of those things, they come from what is something that I believe is very likely true. Well, I shouldn't even say that. I'm really trying not to let my freak flag fly by saying that. No, I know it to be true. I've had many experiences now with elemental beings, and they're interesting. I mean, I'm sure they're all different. I've heard a lot of different experiences that people have had, but there are beings that are tending to the wilderness and tending to the world in energetic ways, and the Native Americans believed in such spirits, and many other cultures do. There's some places where you can't build in certain areas because nope, the fairy folks say don't do it. This is not good energy here in this space. Build your highway over there. We would laugh at anything like that here in America, but there are governing energies within all these things. So the story is that these beings that they had, because they were important beings, they were in contact with these beings directly, these fairies and these things, who were trying to help them along. But there were also evil versions of these energetic beings that were helping the bad guys. So now in the future, there is a veil separating the fairies from the children, and they can't see them anymore. And the only way that these fairies can communicate with the children is through things like synchronicity, delaying them for just an instant so that when they turn around, it's always the same time. Making it in subtle ways by using kind of the butterfly effect on a higher side of things so that things keep lining up for us. And it can be very disturbing. I mean, I was a very strong atheist for so long, and synchronicity was like punching me in the face like crazy. And I just kept laughing, because to me as an atheist, I was just like, this is just stupid. Like, how do I deny this? I couldn't show it to anybody. I couldn't prove it. But I know what's going on. It's happening all the time, these synchronicities. It's crazy. I wrote a song called 149, which was just sort of a random thing that I liked the number and how it sounded. And then the number started haunting me everywhere. When I became more spiritually open to suggestion and started meditating, my favorite numbers, 6, 16, and 26, started following me everywhere. And then eventually there was this interesting change where 17 and 27 became of significance to me, and then those became my new numbers. They were talking to me with those numbers all the time. The numbers 1111 had been noted by so many people as being such a big deal for them. And I remember thinking to myself, I never see 1111. Shortly after that, 1111 showed up at a very strange moment. And the story of the boy and the girl being communicated with from these fairies in this way and in other subtle ways is to communicate to other people who may be having these experiences and feeling like, what am I, crazy? But the other side can only do so much to sort of say hello because they're not embodied here. But energy can affect this place in plenty of ways, and synchronicity is definitely a hello from the spirit world. And I would say to you that if you have somebody who's very close to you, who you've lost, it may be them trying to say hello. And I guess that's all I have to say about that. Okay, So, So to finish up these three over here, we got rhythm, we got that correspondence thing going on, which is just over here, remember, where we split this circle, and we do kind of the Fibonacci thing, and then once we get in here again, we end up with a corresponding sort of level, the other octave, if you will. And then number 12 is infinite compensation. This is a mind. It's a mind, and it's made of perpetual energy. A mind can think of anything it wants to. All right, everybody needs to stop thinking about the world the way the stupid question of what came first, the chicken or the egg, makes you think. You know, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Ooh, that's a brain bender. No, they're just throwing you off the path. The answer is the idea for the chicken, the idea for the egg. Idea comes first. And as you know, you could sit and lie in your bed and think for forever and just never run out of things to think about. Ideas are infinite. And since everything physical comes from the idea world, everything physical is in fact infinite. And infinite compensation, first of the mind, and then eventually in physicality, is just inherent in the universe. The rhythms and correspondences will play themselves out to the bitter end, or the merry end, whatever you want to think of it as. I'm kind of neutrally saying both things, it doesn't matter. And that's what we're going to get to today, about how it doesn't matter whether I say the bitter end or whatever else. It's neutral. So I put law of attraction last. Everybody likes to talk about the law of attraction. You know, The Secret is all about the law of attraction. But if you don't understand this, the law of attraction is just sort of useless to you. Like, you know, we can basically understand, you know, colors a little bit here in terms of what they are just from this polarity thing, the balancing. You know, what happens if you mix a bunch of colors? You get brown, right? Balancing. Rhythm and correspondence. You know, the rhythms, we can imagine that more colors come in other octaves, and then we can imagine that every color is going to play itself out. And we could do the same thing with any other idea, because this is essentially the way ideas are breaking down. We've got idea, we've got polarization of idea, we've got a gradient of ideas that we can explore, we have balances to these ideas, and we can perpetually explore them until we've infinitely run out of things to do. And then on to a new thing, like say, once we're infinite, we invent a physical thing where we might want to attract things. But are we attracting something? The universe is being created from right inside your heart. Anybody who's ever had a really great Superman psilocybin experience will probably tell you, well, most of them, you have different experiences depending on what sort of thing you're embarking on. But one of the great experiences of psilocybin is the deconstruction of your universe and a recognition of how you are actually the person who's creating your universe in the first place. And down to your hopes and dreams for other people. I had been just as like, first the outside world had disappeared and I realized that it wasn't there anymore because I wasn't making it. And then I started to realize that everything in the room was sort of based on ideas that I had, ideas I understood, walls, a ceiling fan, lights, things like this. And then I realized that like if I didn't understand those things, I wouldn't really see it. Like I wouldn't exactly be able to tune in to what it was. And as I recognized that, everything kind of started to disappear. And I remember like my pillow started to disappear and I was like, oh no, I like pillows. Like, well, wait, but it was more like, oh no, I like this thing, darn it, what is that? And as I went into the bathroom, I started to recognize that my friend Aaron was seemingly disappearing. But what I realized later was what was disappearing was my hopes and dreams for my friend. And it was just a very subtle thing. If they had shown me my children, I probably wouldn't have gotten this message so clearly. But because it was my friend, it was just sort of like such a weird thing for me to be thinking. But what I was recognizing was everything that I imagined was possible for him was going to go with me. I was creating what was possible. I was creating what was possible for Aaron. I was creating what was possible in my universe. And we're all creating what is possible in our universe. And the universe is being created from just inside here. now, we are indeed sort of creating many things outside of ourselves, but because of the law of infinite small and infinite big, ultimately, the little part of you that is the infinity is sort of further away deep inside you than anything might be far from you, and closer to you than anything might be far from you. If my large, ridiculous explaining of that makes any sense. But things are inside of you, and you create them from your thoughts and feelings about what the outside world that you're creating looks like. So it's not the law of attraction, it's the law of creation. You're creating the things in the world for you to have access to them. You don't have access to them until you believe you do. So you're creating access to this thing, and essentially creating it because it didn't exist in your universe until you put it there in mind that it was possible. Okay? I think it's probably the best I've explained that particular concept. Anyway, we're going to get into attraction in a big way in the final class, but that's for another day. I guess we're going to get into the law of relativity, unless anybody has any particular questions at the moment.
They're a little bit behind, so you're going to have to wait, but people are commenting about seeing the 1111 synchronicity stuff.
Yeah, you know, you're not crazy. There's everything here that I'm showing you, you know, this is the stuff that we're missing. That's the seams of what's going on in our reality that makes sense of the people who don't really understand what's going on. You know, it seems scientific. It seems like there's measure to it. Look, I can measure it. Yeah, you can. Just like this. You can measure everything just like this, over and over and over and over again. And the fact that there is some real stability to the laws of the universe, the way everything's rolling out, you know, people are looking for that. Unfortunately, to a large degree, this information is being hidden from us. You know, this is stuff that's being taught in secret societies. You know, screw them. I don't care about any of that. I believe that everybody should know. Everybody should understand the basics of how the universe is operating. And this is it. And we're close in so many ways of how we understand different things, but really anything that flies in the face of this stuff, you need to question. Because you can just see this over and over and over again, and it is the stuff that sort of allows for everything else and allows for a lot of the confusion in the world where people are having certain experiences and other people aren't having those experiences. Well, it's not in their mind. They can't attract an experience that they don't believe is possible. You know, even somebody who doubts ghosts or whatever but is scared of them, they can attract that because they got a little piece of, I don't know about this. You know, there's always like a shifting of octaves that goes on. I can remember a really interesting moment. I love Sebastian Bach's voice, love Sebastian Bach, family friend, and he was around, I was introduced to his music when I was younger. And 18 in Life, and I Remember You, and Youth Gone Wild, that whole first album that Skid Row put out. I love that album so much. I remember when I listened to the follow-up record, I was mortified by it because it was so heavy. When I first listened to it, it was such a departure for me from the original record that Skid Row had put out that I had fallen in love with, that I didn't like it at all. And then I remember a year passed or something like that, and I got into Marilyn Manson, who was very weird. You know, like he was heavy, but he was just sort of strange. And I was interested in his strangeness, and this was early Marilyn Manson, which was like Portrait of American Family, which was some really weird stuff. Like he had a really great introduction with Willy Wonka's dissertation on the boat, "There's no earthly way of knowing." It was creepy, weird, interesting. But that introduction to Marilyn Manson and a couple other bands that were adjacent at that time opened me up to heavier music in a way that I hadn't been open to before. And then for some reason I came around to listen to Skid Row's follow-up album again, Slave to the Grind, and I loved it. I really didn't get it the first time. It just like hit my ears and I was just like, ugh. And then I got used to listening to things that were a little bit more like that, and I was super into it. And it demonstrated to me how relative it all is to our perspective, and how easily you can get locked into these things. What was the original question that I was sort of, that made me bring that up in the first place? Because now I'm like, that totally goes to relativity, which is what we're talking about.
Helen was just talking about seeing the 333 and the synchronicity.
Yeah, well, opening yourself up in new ways, opening your perspective up. And my perspective wasn't ready for that Skid Row album. To me, it sounded like just, I don't know, it's too heavy, and Sebastian's beautiful voice or whatever else. And then I went on to love that record. And even they made a heavier record after that, which had a song called Enemy on it, which was really heavy for them. And I love that one too. So, you know, your tastes change as your perspective changes and grows. I mean, just think of yourself as a child right now. I've got 4 kids. And, oh my God, they don't eat anything. I'm trying to get them to eat stuff. It's just like I want to strangle them sometimes. And every now and then I'm just like, you know, I don't know, irrationally thinking that somehow they're doing worse than I am or that I did at eating, and then I'm like, no, you didn't really exactly eat everything. Like I can remember a very terrible moment with my dad, and was not happy. He wanted me to eat something, and like, you know, I'm like, ah, yeah, okay, this is just thing kids do. But eventually, I started to eat things. I eat all sorts of things now. I eat all sorts of things now, and that I never thought of in the past. Like, I mean, I started eating sushi, and when I first started eating sushi, all I ate was the tuna. And then, you know, 6 months later, I was ordering shirashi, which is chef's choice. Send me whatevs. Granted, some things would get to me, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm not gonna eat that. But I was still open in mind of sushi, where I would go to sushi restaurants and I would only order steak. So crazy, relative perspective. And once your relative perspective changes, there's a lot of things that will start coming to you. Synchronicities are definitely one of them. But also, you know, there's something I talked about last week about changing my mind, working very hard to change my mind about what was possible. And I was dealing with, you know, lack of funds at the time, and I was worried, and I sort of right in that moment had a sweet spot of sort of eureka, where I was inspired to sort of think that there was nothing getting in the way of sort of outrageous fortune. You know, you could call it me talking to myself if you want to, but I believe it's me interacting with the energies of the spirit world, and I'll talk and have conversations about these things. And I was saying something to the effect of, well, like, yeah, it's all cool to be open-minded about this, like, attracting stuff and lining up the vibration, but obviously, you know, not anything can happen. It has to happen under certain circumstances or whatever. You know, money's not going to fall out of the sky. And then my spirits, or my intuition, whatever you want to say, went, yeah, it could. And just sort of briefly showed me this glimpse of this this picture, and I've like sang the little song now a few times at other things, but of this man who was transporting drug money across the country, and something went wrong with the plane, and he ended up having to jump out of the plane, but somehow everything went wrong, the plane starts spinning, and money's falling from the sky. And I was like, well, I suppose there's a chance in a billion or whatever, but that could happen. It's possible. And that was sort of, as soon as I said that, you know, because that's atheist Jesse, I wasn't like, woohoo, anything's possible. I was like, well, okay, I see what you're saying here. And they said, hey, look, let the door be open that wide. Let it be, I really don't know what's possible, and I may indeed be blocking myself from what is possible by believing that I do know what is or isn't possible. And to just think that sort of my prosperity is always possible and that I don't have to know how that happens. And when I had this sort of realization of that my prosperity was always possible, I didn't need to know how it would happen, I ended up getting a call from my job. I'm the voice of Food Paradise. We've done like 175 episodes now to date. We were previously doing 13 episode seasons. And at the time, a few months beforehand, I had like 6 months earlier, I had just been rehired for the job after sort of being fired for a couple months. Not really being fired, but not being, my contract not being picked up because I was a freelance voiceover actor. My production company fought for me. They ended up fighting for me twice. And the second time, I ended up getting hired back to do the gig. And the next season, the new executive who had previously been brought in was replaced. And the new executive who came in, she loved our show and felt that it was a linchpin for the channel. And she made a 65 episode order season of our show. And I was previously doing 13 episodes. So like, you want to talk about relativity, like I had no idea that from 13 to 65, like that was just an alien concept to me that could happen. But I had just opened myself up to the idea that things could happen that were completely alien or, unlikely to me. And that the only thing really standing in the way of that, because I was the one creating my universe, was me. So, that's the importance of recognizing, your power in this situation here. So now, we're going to get into relativity. Let's set up here with a marker. Okay. So, the universal law of relativity, let's break down the word relativity. Relativity, related, relate, relatives. Also, you could think of this as perspective, perception, how we observe a thing. On my thing here, on my paper, I drew myself a little ladder. And, we could think of these in a lot of ways, right? Okay. So we could go in different places on this curve of our thing. Each one of them is relative to the others, right? Everything is connected relatively. And if you went line down the center, you could kind of fold these things to those things to those things. So I want to say right here that there is this going on within reality itself, okay? Every single person, every single molecule is related to each other. We're all related down to just every little thing. And we're all ultimately just ideas anyway, mind taken form. So every molecule is relative to one another. They're not equal. Nothing is equal. I mean, you could essentially say that, oh, well, this one's relative to this one, relative to this one. Like if you look under a microscope and you go look at these identical cells here or something like that. They're not. Nothing is identical energetically on the other side of things. Everything is part of the split of the consciousness that's been split down into very unique energetic things. Those energetic things can go into various things and fit into them in various ways, but their unique shape that comes from the universe itself being a unique part of that consciousness of creation is going to give unique form to each and every individual thing. Every individual thing is unique and they're all relative to one another. So within that context, it was interesting. A long time ago, there was like a really wonderful bit that was said, and for a while, everybody, people seem to be accepting of it, of everybody's special. And then I remember comedians started taking that apart, and like certain things started taking that apart and trying to make it that everybody wasn't special. At the time, I loved that everybody was special, because I believed that, I knew that inherently in my soul, that everybody was special, everybody was unique. Nobody was coming from the same place. And when we look at the universe being this infinite compensation, infinite correspondence, and when we talk about dimensions in the multiverse, like we talked about that last week, we talked about the different dimensions, the multiverse of possibilities, that every possibility for you as an individual is playing out on some level of this mind. It's being played out, right? So why wouldn't it be a waste of energy for the universe to make anybody who's just like you? Not only that, it's just sort of like a robotic, inherent nature of the universe, that the universe is just, it only has so much, it is what it is. It's splitting up into infinitesimal pieces, but those infinitesimal pieces can only come from the gradient of its created self. And that may be something incredible that we can't, quite understand, but still, it's being made of nothing and something. And we can only make so many things. Eventually, everything is sort of like done to some degree, and then you build upon the things that were done that you have perspective on because of things that were previously done. That can continually be being done. But every idea, every shape, every form, everything can be thought, right? So, let's see. Not equal, relative. Let's see, number 2. Sorry, my page, I just like wrote a ton of notes. Usually I kind of order these, and then I ordered them afterwards. So I'm going to be like, where is it? Okay, so number 2. There is no good or bad, right or wrong, until we relate it to something else, okay? We talked in previous weeks, and actually if we go over here, as we break down this thing of the polarity, and we were breaking it down to degrees. Over here we've got fast and slow, and then, what is the stuff, like in the middle, the different degrees of it. So when we relate it to something else, a polarity, fast versus slow. But even within that, something that we could do is like, I can draw a cube here, and we'll call this cube small. Okay, and then I can draw this cube here, and we can call it big. And then I can draw this. Big. In the context of this being small and big, what's that? And granted, we invent words to sort of scale for these things, but at the same time, if you're making a scale that goes on forever, eventually it gets, larger than you can describe, or smaller than you describe, or whatever. The language is just defining things in different measurements. And that's really what's going on here with relativity, is we're measuring things in various ways, but the way we measure it is based on our perspective. When we're here with the small and big, our perspective is, yeah, that's big, that's small. When we get over here, we're like, well, I guess that's kind of small too. We'd call this big, and we'd call both of these small. Isn't that interesting? These would both be small. These are both small compared to that. It's not like a medium, it's like really big. So this is big, these are both small now. That changes the perspective relative to the one thing to another. So relativity, we are relating things together. One thing, something, you got it. Okay, number 3 here. So with today is our 5th class going through the 13 laws, and we are on number 5 here. And number 5, it's interesting when we look at relativity and its relation to the number 5, we find a lot of interesting things. And I'm going to talk about them in a second. But the fifth law, the fifth dimension here, let's see, where is my, okay, right here. 5D, if we look at 12 dimensions of consciousness, the 5D world we can think of as the spirit world, infinite decisions, choice. But if we talk about the law of one and how Ra talked about the spirit world, he talks about the fifth dimension being the place where we go after the fourth dimension, which is the dimension of love. And right here, we're in the third dimension, the dimension of choice, where we choose between service to self or service to others. And then the next dimension is a dimension of love, where we're all super lovey. But within this dimension, there is sometimes a overpolarization in love where people are self-sacrificing themselves. So the fifth dimension is a dimension where they go in to balance all of these overpolarized characteristics, which I think is interesting in the context of, you know, fifth, we're going in to balance everything. We're going in to find the relativity that we're missing. In the fifth dimension, in the fourth dimension, it's all about love. Yay, love, love, love. We're going in the fourth. And then in the fifth dimension, we're trying to find the relativity that we require to bring ourselves into balance for the future as we move through creation. So I think that's interesting that that would be the fifth dimension of that sort of rebalancing of self with the oneness. 3, sorry, looking at my numbers, 3B, spirit world, many dimensions, many perspectives. Yeah, I did that. Okay.
So they're a little bit behind with the questions and catching up. Lyle is saying, so would you say then that if it can be thought of, then it can be created and or done?
Absolutely. And essentially, something I was going to say later, whatever position something is in sort of proves the possibility of any one of its relatives as possible. There's always the possibility within this gradient of creation. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the multiverse is playing out all of those possibilities all the time.
Lyle also says that's quite interesting. So what is considered big or even huge today could be viewed as small or tiny 100 years from now.
Yeah, think about this. When I was a little kid, my mom always used to have on MTV, because my dad was a musician and his band Twisted Sister was always playing at that time in commercials and stuff. And my mom would be like, Jesse, you know, come in here and watch. So I was always like kind of mesmerized by the TV. And I remember when I went to go look up Beastie Boys' Fight for Your Right to Party, I was blown away how little they were. As a 2-year-old, 1-year-old, they were adults and I was a little kid. So I thought that they were big, and their name was the Beastie Boys. The name, the Beastie Boys, and me being a child, and they were like the toughest guys I'd ever seen in my life, and they wanted to fight for my right to party. And then I saw them as a teenager, and I'm like, what the hell's going on here? I was so confused. But it was just, I was a little boy, and from the little boy's perspective, you know, there you go. Just like in Hook, when Dustin Hoffman says to Peter Pan, he's like, to a 10-year-old, I'm huge, or to an 8-year-old, I'm huge. I remember you being bigger, Robin Williams says, right? So that's very funny. Any other questions?
Then there's one more comment from Lyle, who says, I thought that the fourth dimension was space and time, which seems to be a common kind of...
Fourth dimension was space and time. No, I don't think so. I think dimension number 1 is time, because the time of stacking is consciousness. Consciousness began stacking on itself. Whatever it did first and whatever else, it just went consciousness. So on some level, the progression of consciousness is just time kicking up. Then, this is the way I've seen it broken down the best. That's the way that they like to talk about it, but I don't think that's right. Time and then space is number 2. Space is this sort of connection here of 1 to 2 and then the invisible third being created. That to me is the time and space, sort of the polarity that gets created immediately. It creates a third perspective on itself in conscious form. So dimensions, and granted, there are a lot of ways to look at dimensions too. You could look at dimensions as dimension number 1 being the consciousness of rock, dimension number 2 being the consciousness of animals, dimension number 3 being the consciousness of human beings, dimension number 4 being the consciousness of higher beings. So there's a few different ways to talk about this. And if you wanted to talk about it from a scientific standpoint, I would have to sort of regurgitate what they're saying based on actual spiritual law, which is governing what they're talking about without acknowledging. And I'm trying to, and this is more within acknowledging these things. But if you talk about time, space, and then gravity, that sort of these 3 things come together like 3 mirrors around you to create sort of an anchoring force of gravity that I think has a lot to do with perspective. The perspective is sort of an anchoring force within each piece of energy that is the soul of a thing or whatever, is some amount of anchoring perspective that is creating gravity in a lot of different ways, because I guess the earth has perspective as well, which is gravity. So it's like gravity is like a scientific way to talk about perception in some fashions. Yeah.
So the next question is, what would you call it when one dimension bleeds into another, when you can see multiple levels all in one?
Well, see, that's the thing. You can talk about dimensions in a lot of ways, and if you are open, you can perceive anything. We come into this place very open, and then we narrow our field of vision to our parents and the things that we're being shown. But generally, children are very open-minded until our minds are closed for one reason or another. But openness to other dimensions is very possible when you go on substances like ayahuasca or psilocybin. You're just getting yourself into a state of openness and susceptibility to other aspects of the dimension that we're in that you might not be perceiving normally. It's widening your layers of perception and your depth of perception within this plane. Does that kind of answer the question? Yeah. Okay. So I mean, like there's a lot of different ways to look at these different dimensions of consciousness, and I'd have to look at the one that you're suggesting, because there are multiple fashions, and it may be right in its own way. So often, it's sort of the language that we're using to describe a thing, depending on where you're coming from, you're like, well, that's not right. But if, from their perspective, they may be kind of trying to talk about the same thing that you're trying to talk about in different ways, and sometimes it can be difficult to understand where that is. A lot of people want to talk about God with different names, and the universe with different names. For me, the totality of all thought of the universe, that's God, that's the universe. If you were thinking that it's something else, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about all of the mind that knows all of the things. We are all part of that mind, but the thing that is the totality of everything is the thing. But I might say God or the universe, and you might think, well, what does that mean? Like the Milky Way galaxy? Or what does that mean? Like the guy in the robe? No, I don't mean that. I mean every single thing in existence is an idea. Every idea in existence comes from a mind. The thing that is ultimately thinking everything, that's what I mean when I say God or the universe. All right, so I'm going to continue on to 3, 4. Where's number 4? Measurement. Okay, so so many of these things about consciousness, like these universal laws, it's like in order to be God, in order to be a creator who is in their own power, recognizing what they are, you need to recognize these laws, okay? Because you are naturally polarized. You're just naturally polarized. That is who you are at your heart, because at the heart of the creation of the mind is polarization. At the heart of the creation of the mind is a lot of different vibrations and a lot of relative vibrations to that. And essentially a need for balancing energy to bring us back to that oneness that we've lost sight of. So we have to look at and understand these things so that we can get our minds right and go, I know how my mind works as God. I know how I've done this whole creation myself, thinking all the things that I think. I've polarized myself in different ways. I've ended up vibrating here, and I need to find a balancing vibration to myself in my life, whether it's through my work or my friends. And instead, I've got a whole bunch of friends who are vibrating over here, and it's making it worse. I'm not being balanced. I'm not getting the balance of gender that I require in myself or for myself. To recognize these inherent patterns within the mind of God is to allow yourself to heal. You don't want to forever be locked into this measurement, this comparing and contrasting of fast and slow. No, it's speed. It's speed. Temperature. Wim Hof has been a wonderful person. I don't know if you look him up. He's an older guy. He'd lost his son a long time ago, and he ended up investigating a lot of just different things, trying to make sense of it all. And he's become known as the Iceman, and he goes around teaching people how to breathe and go out into the wilderness in the cold snow and freezing water and stay, warm, not die, not go into hypothermic shock or anything, through breathing and, the right attitude, the right state of mind. And this is all very positive. Wim Hof has changed his attitude about temperature. He is now going into cold temperature, and he doesn't have the anxieties that I might. I just moved from California back to New York, and I'm being such a baby about the temperature right now. It's really funny. Though at the same time, because of Wim Hof, I did start ending my shower, every hot shower I take, I turn the water really cold. And I didn't like it at all, really, at first. But I knew the merit of it, that there was really good science behind why it was good for you, that I trusted, and that I had positive experiences with that hot to cold thing at like different retreats and stuff, doing a really hot steam bath and then jumping into really cold water. It was really good. I could tell that it was endorphins, and like it was cleansing my body in a certain way. My pores, felt cleaner. It was really a lovely thing. So I started doing it, and I swear to you, it took like 3 months or something, but I love it now, and I look forward to turning on the cold water at the end of my shower. I get all excited, and I know that my endorphins are gonna get released, and I'm gonna get this great like blood rush that I'm gonna get, and I seriously get excited, and now I hang out there for a minute sometimes. Not like a really long time, because I don't want to like make my body temperature too, like suck in too much cold temperature before I get out. But I will sit there and be like invigorated, and it's kind of like sex, like a positive, energetic experience. Just, oh wow, that feels so nice, like, whew, and you just feel this wonderful release just from changing that temperature. And talk about changing my perspective on the cold water. I like that. My kids always want me to go into the pool, and I'm like, oh, I'll put in my, and you slowly change your perspective. You're like getting into the water deeper. You're like, oh. But if you can just jump in and get that real, that crazy jolt, and start moving around and get acclimated to the water, it's over. And there you are. You're off to the races. You're playing in the pool. So, and that all goes to relativity as well. So yes, So measurement. We're here on this measurement scale that's being created by, you know, this polarization and this gradient that's getting created here, and we don't want to be on that for forever. 5. 5. So we'll talk about, you know, the 5 platonic solids. You know, the 5th one's the dodecahedron, which is made up of, you know, the 5-sided shape, like all met together, and that's the thing that represents the ether. It's interesting. There's only 5 of these platonic solids. They're basically solids that you can make with a single shape without using like additional shapes. Like there's other shapes you can make when you interchange the different ones, but with just a single form, an even-sided shape, you can only make 5. And the 5th one's considered the ether. If you go through numerology and tarot, you get a lot of similar things that come up, and I think they're interesting for relativity as a thing. In general, you get 5 is a challenge. Here comes a new challenger. A challenge or experience, courage, tension, new cycles, obstacles, change. The nature of balancing your soul in the 5th dimension, as Ra would say, from being overly loving and taking yourself back to a place of balance, I would call that experience, exploring experience, courage, tension, exploring the tension, exploring courage, obstacles, instability, conflict, which is what comes up in the tarot. All these things are essentially what you're keying on. It's sort of easy to go from the 3rd dimension to the 4th dimension. It's like you're lost and you're imbalanced, but if you get a sniff of, hey, wait, everything's one and I love everybody, and just go with that, you can go flying into that 4th dimension without having really balanced the important things that you need to balance about self-loathing or shame or your perspective on yourself or whatever it might be. And in this 5th dimension, that's where we go and we get out all those remaining things. And I'm sure it takes a lot of courage and strength to go and do that kind of stuff, because we're exploring all of these little nooks and crannies. So anyway, that's interesting. Those are the number associations for number 5. Number 6 on my list, I want to get into. Also, if I didn't point this out good enough, the correspondence and polarity, you know, these are just different ways of describing the relativity, which is sort of the more microcosm version of the thing. The polarity is showing the thing broken down as 2 things. And then the relativity is many options within that polarized thing. 6. Okay, 7. So talking a little bit about Einstein's theory of relativity, or you know how they talk about relativity on that end of things. You can talk about flipping a coin in a straight car. So like if you're driving down a highway, you can sit there, you can flip the coin, no problem. You know, if the car starts turning and stuff like that, that's going to interrupt the thing. But that basically your velocity is changing. Time is moving differently for you in that car. And it's interesting because basically what Einstein was saying was that like the speed of light, the time, if you were traveling at the speed of light, time would be going slower for you. And that the people who are, let's say, what was the other one that they had? It was a good example. If you were on the back of a truck, right, and you had a pitcher pitch into a catcher, and the truck's driving, and he could pitch that ball. From the outside looking in, if you were to go test the speed of that ball, it might be going twice as fast as the car is going relative to you outside, right? But actually on the truck, the pitch is just going the normal speed that the pitcher throws his pitch. But now he's on a car that's additionally moving him. And this all came out of Einstein thinking that he was on a train and that the planet was moving. You know, the planet itself was rotating around the sun through the cosmos at crazy speeds, and that it was all sort of relative, you know, to each other, like, you know, these perspectives. So that's basically how you know, he was talking about these. You know, we can't feel the Earth's rotation because it's relative to the experience that we're having. Continuing on here, 7b. So 7b is kind of interesting. So there was another really good example that was brought up talking about a conveyor belt, and that a person standing on the side of a moving conveyor belt could talk to somebody over, you know, on the thing as they were talking, and then, like, as they started to pass them, they wanted to stay there, right? So they started walking to provide the relativity of the motion that this escalator, you know, this moving walkway was giving them, to compensate for it, to bring to balance so that they could have the conversation with the person over here. Because moving walkway equals every couple seconds the floor is moving that way. But if I walk as it moves, this cancels out the every couple seconds the thing's moving. So we're using relativity there, the law of relativity, to cancel out the relativity that's going on. Like, this was being shown to show Einstein's law of relativity, which has some similarities but is very specific. And the law of relativity, as we're talking about it, is wider, sort of in scope for our perspective. All right, so let's see, moving walkway, and then what else I wanted? Move through space. Faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. Oh yeah, that's basically what Einstein said, was the faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. So like if I'm moving in a train, on some level, time is the thing that's changing. It's very interesting. I really gotta, like, some of the things were sort of bending my mind, and some of the things were bucking up against some of my understanding of spiritual law, and I really would like to understand better. Because I know Einstein himself, he was not so sacrosanct about so many of his ideas and theories, and he had lots of ideas that were, I think it's this, but it also might be this. And he really did account for a lot of other possibilities within his theories. It's very interesting when you go back through you know, history. I really think, you know, Einstein would support what I'm saying here, and would just be more interested in trying to demonstrate it as many ways as possible, which is what he has been doing, was doing, and so many of the greats like Tesla have done. You know, these are the rules that everything is playing by. So also, you'll experience, sometimes this will really freak people out who try like cannabis for the first time, and they'll have sort of a time dilation experience where things are not like, you know, a song will be on and you'll have felt like you'll have 1,000 thoughts, and then all of a sudden you realize like it hasn't even gotten finished with the guitar opening that's like 8 seconds long. And you're just like, what? You know, for me, that was always an incredible experience. Because like I've said before, I've dabbled with psychedelics to learn. And those were the sort of the beginnings of what made me really want to explore further, because marijuana was recommended to me because I had a lot of anxiety. But when I was experiencing things like time dilation, that piqued my curiosity as just a man of science. I didn't exactly understand how these things were possible, what was going on, where time was moving so differently, and wanting to understand how that was happening, it's the same thing of when you're experiencing a higher dimension or a lower dimension that might normally be outside of your purview, but now it is. That time dilation, all of a sudden my experience of time was very different. It was me that was changing the experience of time, not my movement. The movement can change your perception, but also you can change your perspective of time. As everybody knows, time flies when you're having fun, right? Time flies when you're having fun. Everybody knows that. You're like, what? Oh man, it's an hour, Mom. No, please. Like, oh, we've been playing games. It feels like 10 minutes. Everybody knows what that's like. Anyway, so that's moving on, number 7. Okay, so now we're going to get to point number 8. Low points prove the existence of equal highs in the multiverse. Yeah, so I said before, to a certain degree, if we can see something over here, we know that we have to have its polarity over here and the possibility of its whole gradient over here. The possibilities exist. And this universe seems to be working out every possibility that there is within a multiverse of possibilities. So the one thing sort of proves the other thing because it does so ideologically. And if it does so ideologically, anything that can be thought, everything is thought. Everything has come out of thought. So anything that can be thought can be. That's just the way it is. Anything that can be thought can be. And you know, I say that, I feel like those words aren't even right. Anything that can be thought is. Because just like the mind sort of just explodes into infinite consciousness, devoid of time, just sort of necessity, just sort of, you know, time is so much our perspective. As you see, time flies when you're having fun. Time is the perspective of the universe. Our perspectives have been divided up into tiny little bits of pieces that aren't really seeing the deeper, full perspective of our deep, 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 deep connection and relativeness to one another in various ways. So we can't properly appreciate it. But it's like, you know, you're relative to D. Snider, you know, my dad, you know, the rock star, or I am, in various ways. We are all relative to him. There's no shame that we're not D. Snider, and there's no shame that D. Snider's not Ozzy Osbourne. You know, a contemporary to him, they're all relative to the various experiences that they're having in one way or another. And so much of the relative experiences that they're having is not an experience that takes place on this earth in this lifetime. It's an experience that has taken place over many lifetimes. It's measure of previous action, things that need to be learned, things that don't need to be learned, desires that each man has versus desires that other people have. You know, the business is done differently by different people. Worlds are built differently because everybody is a unique snowflake. And, you know, when you see something of like, you know, people being held in regard, that's just sort of like a silly notion or idea. And largely so many of these things are dictated by necessity of the various people. Like a Lemmy Kilmister, you know, it was the fact that he was always around and he was a great guy and he consistently showed up and made music that people loved and had energy or whatever. And he became a pillar of the music community. You know, Motorhead is one of my favorite bands, but objectively, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're the most elegant and artistic of bands in the music world that should necessarily have been lucky enough to be held in the regard that Lemmy Kilmister is held in. Lemmy is God, you know, especially in Europe. You know, you could make an argument that Lemmy could have easily fallen through the cracks, but by Lemmy's nature, Lemmy is the elder statesman of the rock and roll community, and he really meant a lot to a lot of people and was a good man, and that enabled him to be this pillar of the community. I think over time, my father has similarly kind of come up as an ideological human being, somebody who believes what he says and says what he believes and is very consistent. People have come to hold him in regard as an honest man, and he's become more than just this rock star, whatever. So you can change the way people perceive you over time, and my father in particular is a great example. He's done that many times of changing people's perception. You know, people didn't necessarily view him as a horror movie maker before he made that movie Strangeland, and all of a sudden that was something that was in his wheelhouse. So perception is all in the mind, and so often it starts with you and what you think is possible and what you want to do, and then you have to, sometimes change other people's minds about who you are and what the perceptions may be. Let's see, I am here, so low points, boop, 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 boop. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about relativity using superheroes. So let's start here with Batman, right? So Batman's got, let's put Batman as the center. Let's see how we can do here. So, Batman's in the middle, and the lasting villains and characters that show up in Batman's life, you're going to see, if I can on the spot do this, because I didn't do it ahead of time, but I thought I could kind of figure it out. You're going to see they're all relatives of his in various ways. So you could put the Joker over here. We'll go with this side is evil and this side is good, right? So we'll put the Joker here on this side. And then up here on this side, we'll put Superman. Superman won't threaten somebody or murder somebody like Batman might. To Batman, anybody who murders is evil. Okay. So now we'll get somebody like Catwoman, who we can also say is just kind of a pole to Batman in that sex. This is a pole to Batman in alignment. Pole to Batman sexually. Catwoman is similar to Batman. She's wearing a black suit, but she's got boobs, and she's a bad guy, right? So now, Superman, on the good side, we'd also have maybe, say, Batgirl, who also, we'll go with alignment for Superman here. Superman doesn't threaten people. Batgirl, she has sex, right? But we might say actually Batwoman would be the more accurate one, and then Batgirl would actually be some subordinate, again, sort of adjacent prong here, a young girl. Okay. And then, because basically we could put Batgirl on a pole right here, we could say, oh, well, Batwoman becomes her own middle. And now we've got the prong, we've got old Batwoman, young Batwoman, that we could find a place for these places because they're all relatives to the thing. And that's what the brain likes. That's what the mind of God likes because it's what we do. It's naturally how we build things. So all these relatives are there. Then we could take something like, let's say, the Riddler. The Riddler is off here specifically dealing with the mind. Batman's mind is a peak mind. That's one of his things. So we've got the Riddler, and he's something for Batman's mind to chew on. Similarly, we might have Mr. Terrific. Let's go with somebody directly related to Batman. We'll go with Tim Drake. Tim Drake was smart enough to figure out who Batman was. Tim Drake figured out that Batman was Bruce Wayne. The reason why we like Tim Drake immediately is because Tim represented the polarization of Batman as an intellect. Batman's an intellect. The reason why Robin kind of always inherently worked as the boy wonder, the original Robin, Dick Grayson, is because he's an acrobat. And the acrobat nature, the physical nature of people who can literally fly through the air for real, the people who do that, Batman's doing it, and it's like, that's bullcrap. Acrobats are the one group of people who legitimately do that day to day, swing through the city. So Nightwing's representing Batman's strength, Batman's physicality. Tim Drake is representing his mind. Okay? You could say that Bane, and Bane actually, Bane's an interesting one, because Bane's really a little bit more of a polarized character. Bane hasn't really been portrayed very well in the films. If you remember the stupid Batman and Robin, they like kick the thing out of the back, and then the other one who's got the weird voice, and it finds out that he wasn't responsible for anything. He is actually a mastermind character. So you would kind of consider Bane a character like here, a polarized of Batman. When they brought him in, he was the antithesis alignment to Batman, but a planner, a strength. He had all the things that Batman was, so would be a polarized character. But say a character like Killer Croc would be more easily thought of as the evil representation of Batman's strength. Or a character like the Man-Bat. You know, Man-Bat's a cool one because it takes on Batman's motif relative to him. He's dressed as a bat, this guy is a bat, and he's representative of physical strength that Batman is representing as being a strength and a mind, right? And this is kind of like a really cool one with Batman, because Batman, really what he represents is the combination of the mind, body, and spirit. You know, and that's the thing, you know, his spirit is his alignment, and then these three things broken out. So who is Batman as a person? Now, a couple things that you end up getting here too is that you'll get a character like, once we have these things, we can flip these things. Like more characters that we might add here. We want a, let's talk about Harvey Dent. Harvey Dent, originally introduced Harvey Dent Two-Face was Two-Face, but when they reintroduced him back into continuity, they made it that he was a friend of Batman's, which eventually got into the movies. He was a friend. And at the end of The Dark Knight, Two-Face dies, but in the comics, Two-Face survives. And it was brilliant storytelling that happened because of the wonderful relativity that Batman all of a sudden had a villain who was formerly his friend. So, you know, you got somebody here, let's say, what's his name? Harvey is representing the good of Batman over here, the good alignment, and then he gets put over here. Now he's fundamentally different than the Joker because the Joker is just the broken, switched over alignment of Batman. Two-Face is the formally aligned, you know, with Batman or better guy who's now somewhere else. When you go and talk about, say, the Justice League, all of these characters, you know, they love to talk about the big seven, but let's just do, let's say, 6 characters here. So Batman is relative to Superman. Batman will intimidate the hell out of guys and scare the hell out of them. He's scary. And Superman is inspiring. This kind of necessitated Wonder Woman to be played sort of in the middle. She's intimidating. Wonder Woman, but not scary. Intimidating, not scary. Now, when it came to characterizing the 7 of the Justice League when Grant Morrison came on, he made a little trifecta with Green Lantern and the Flash and Aquaman within some of these things. In being that, or actually, I was trying to think of a better example, but these 3 you can see right here. Let me see. I'll do it with Green Arrow, Green Lantern. So Green Lantern was made sort of into a Republican when they got combined into a book together. And because of that, green arrow became the very liberal guy. And any number of characters who were with them were always the ones in the middle of these polarized characters. But as you can see, over time, each one of these characters developed into a very specific prism because of how it related to the other ones within the larger whole. And this is really just a cool way to see how these universes have been built. If you broke down the Lord of the Rings and different character archetypes and stuff, and you'll find that they're all kind of doing this thing where they're all relative to one another in interesting ways. You look at a picture of a great X-Men team. The great X-Men team has a big guy, and he's got maybe a little guy, and it's got some women, and it's got some men, and it's this balanced thing. And just looking at them, they look relative to each other. The best teams do. The more uniform they look, you know, the more it looks like soldiers or something else. But the more dynamic and interesting they are in their relativeness to each other, whilst, you know, keeping some amount of uniformity, the more interested we really are. So that's talking about that from a little superhero perspective. 10 after 9. Okay. Wait, 10 after 9. What time do we start? How long have we been going?
Usually you go to 9.
And I'm 10 after 9? It's been that long? I can't believe it's that long. Wow, really? Well, cool. I'm almost done. I'll wrap up. We talked a little bit about this last time in terms of using relativity and being funny, that you're basically judging what the audience's perspective on the thing that you're talking about is, and that you can adjust how you deliver a thing to appropriate energy for the audience's expectation. And this is all based on relativity as well. So finally, you know, what we want to get down to is measurement is void, okay? All is one thing, one related thing. If this person is seemingly behind another person, it's just because they haven't had the experience that the other soul, the other energy has had along the path. There's no need to judge ourselves or anybody else as being in a negative state, because there's always something below. And if you look at terms of like right now, things going on the planet and things that were going on the planet yesterday, like the Crusades or something like that, you know, thousands of years ago or 100 years ago, living in the Stone Age, you can always sort of just go back and make a thing worse and worse and worse and worse if you want to, or better and better and better. But we're moving up and ahead, and it is for us, in us, to choose the reality that we want. And any vibration we may be holding at the moment has a relativity, and that we can align ourselves with that relativity and bring that universe into existence instead of, you know, whatever it is that we might be experiencing at the moment. I guess that's a cool place to wrap it up, because I was going to talk like a little bit longer about why it's silly to measure anything, but I think the point is everything that I said leading up to this. Everything is just part of one infinitely relative thing. And even the worst atrocity that might be here, you know, like we're always hearing about them after the fact. You know, like these things happen and it's relative to the next to the next. All of these souls are on different journeys and different things. There's a lessening that's happening over time. And we don't need to focus on what we might see or feel or experience sometimes, because we have to just know that all this energy is working itself out and things are always moving along to a new and better place. Anyway, I'm Jesse Blaze Snider. Join me next week when we will be discussing gender, my favorite, number 6, gender and balance, and you know, how to use relativity to figure out how to balance yourself. I need to balance myself. Love you guys. Bye.